Welcome back, everybody, to the Thrivestry podcast, where we talk about creating change in our lives and in the world around us. I'm your host, Jeremy Jones, and this is Ann Lundy, not
Hi,
Gigi.
thank you.
So it's a little bit different podcast today. I wanted to bring on Ann. Ann is the person who's been helping me with Thrivestry. She's one of the people that's been helping me with Thrivestry. And if you guys have been doing the Spark programming, you might have noticed that she's the one who's crafting a lot of those posts. So she and I create that programming together. She's been kind of taking on different pieces and parts of it, but including the uploading of those documents. But we're going to get to know Ann today, and she's going to talk about what she's been doing and her sort of background in this whole fitness thing, and then also then we're also going to talk about this article from the New York Times about procrastination. And so I think everybody struggles a little bit with procrastination, some more than others. I haven't put a lot of thought into it. I keep putting it off. Haha. That was a joke. No, but it's a really interesting perspective on procrastination that you probably haven't realized. And I think Ann and I both thought it was really interesting because it's something that kind of spoke to both of us individually. So Ann, tell us about yourself. How did we get to know each other and all that stuff? And how did you get into this whole fitness thing?
Well, I met you through your wife, actually. Your wife and I have been friends for going on 19 years.
Yeah, so you've known my wife longer than I have.
Yeah, yes. And you were the one that actually got me into CrossFit. So I've been doing CrossFit for 12 years. Jamie, your wife, said, hey, Jeremy's opened this gym. He needs people to come check it out. And I said, okay, I'm a willing participant, because at that point in my life, I was about 50 pounds overweight, and I had just quit smoking and quit antidepressants. And so I was getting started on the journey to being healthier. So I went to the gym, and with you, and we did Tabata everything. I think that was my first workout.
Sorry.
And
12 years ago, I wasn't the programming master I am today.
No, but I couldn't do any of it. I could barely squat. I think sit-ups were the only thing I could accomplish.
And I think, for those of you guys who don't know, Tabata is a 20-second interval, 10-second rest for 8 rounds. So it's 4 minutes. And Tabata everything is you just go through a series of different movements, 4 minutes of, I don't remember if it was pull-ups and sit-ups and
pull-ups,
squats.
Push-ups, sit-ups, and squats.
Yeah. And it's actually not that bad of a workout, especially for beginners, because you can only do so many. The problem is just it's going to make them really, really sore. And the problem is for more intermediate and advanced people is it's going to make you really sore because you're going to do so many more reps. And so that's why I don't really program Tabata everything anymore. And not to mention, from a class standpoint, it's just really annoying when you're coaching for multiple hours to have the timer beeping going.
Oh, the timer.
Or having to stare at the clock and just call out stop go for 16 minutes, so 32 times every hour.
If you have 4 classes that day, it gets a little.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, so you did, didn't you? I don't remember, but I remember, I think you were also working part-time at a cafe at a gym. So you actually had a Globo gym membership, right? Didn't you work at
that had started to occur as well. So I started working out with you at the shed.
Yeah.
And I was really getting into it. And then I took on a part-time job along with my full-time job to help kind of pay for my daughter's college. And at the hotel that had it was a club sport.
Mm-hmm.
So
how old's your daughter?
She's 30.
Yeah, I just want to put that in perspective for people, especially if you're watching the video. You can see that Ann does not look like she has a 30-year-old daughter. So she basically had her daughter when she was 6.
Right.
Well, that's what we're going to go with.
Yeah, that sounds good. I like 36. So the gym was, very advanced, and I also lived on a very good trail. So I started doing a lot of running as well, and just kind of found, myself in this whole process, because before I was just, working and I didn't really, I felt sore all the time, and I just had aches and pains, and
So
was actually probably 36 at the time.
So you started this journey, and then you changed your diet too, right? And
Yeah.
your weight loss, and how much
I
time?
At that time I probably dropped about 55 pounds. Yeah, over about a year or so. Yeah, year to 18 months. So,
It's good.
uh, go ahead.
Oh, I said that's really good.
Yeah, it's life changing. I don't think if you've always been thin, if you've never had a weight problem, you don't know how life changing losing all that weight is. Just from being, you just feel lighter, and then movements, such as CrossFit. There it is.
This is the photo, right? This is after a mud run, I think. So you were doing a little bit more running, I think, at this time.
Yeah, yeah. My body type actually is very different from that right now. So that
Yeah,
was when
you
a lot of
definitely.
fitting.
Yeah, you got a little bit more muscle on you now, but you
Yeah,
definitely have some abs there. And
yeah.
I I love how in this photo you're also drinking a Starbucks.
Oh, and I guarantee you that was a caramel macchiato.
Mm.
It was probably from breakfast because my breakfast every day for a while was a caramel macchiato and blueberry scone. So
Yeah, so this was like about 6 or 9 months apart.
it's probably about a year.
Oh, about a year. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I mean, just huge changes, and like I said, it not only physically but also changed your life. So then
Yeah.
you continue to work in the corporate world for a
Yeah.
while, right?
Yeah.
And but it's still training, and then you moved away, and so then you found a gym out there. And where are you? And then you started to get interested in coaching, right?
Yeah. So I was really, after about 6 years of doing CrossFit, I decided I wanted to, just see what the training was all about, right?
Mhm.
So, and I got a lot of encouragement from my husband. He's like, you would be great at this. And what's funny is in the corporate world, even though I wasn't a trainer, that was the part that I enjoyed most, was helping people on board and getting them going. So, so I went and did my level 1, and I just kind of snuck and did it. I didn't tell anybody about it. And then at the gym that I was at, my husband said to the owner, "Hey, she just got her level 1. I hear you need coaches." And I'm all, "Shh, don't say anything. I'm not
Well, it's
ready."
funny because that kind of ties into the procrastination thing a little bit too, right? You
Yeah,
didn't tell anyone because you didn't want to like fail or be embarrassed.
exactly. So that led into the internship, and then I started coaching a couple of nights a week just on my own. And me and the corporate world eventually decided to part ways.
You
Right?
left. You escaped.
Yeah, I escaped.
You abandoned it.
Uh, I was not my best self in the corporate world, and there was just that moment of, okay, I think I'm done. And so, and my husband was ready for me to be done, and he said, "Take your cardboard box into work and bring everything home." And I did,
Yeah.
and the timing was right, because I was not the main coach at my gym, but the main coach, I think a month or two after I quit my job, quit being their main coach. And
Mm.
so that was an opportunity for me to get
So
more.
yeah, so this is where you're at now. This is what gym are you
Yeah.
at now?
Tamalpais CrossFit in San Rafael, California.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that is the Marin area for those of you guys who don't know, which is a very hoity-toity part of the Bay
A little
Area.
affluent area. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I am not of the affluent.
and
My husband and I live on government housing, which is why we were able to.
which sounds funny, but he has a government job and they provide housing.
Yeah.
You guys aren't in like government
Yeah.
living or something.
So,
But
uh,
yeah, so that's pretty cool. So and then you started coaching, and you even coached at one. You even came across the bridge and coached for me for a while at one of the gyms I
yeah.
used to own, which was really a treat.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, so now this is your main gig, and then
Yeah.
I was looking to expand programs and bring on more help to help me kind of grow this whole Thrivestry thing. And so then we started talking about this program, the Spark program. And but before we get into that a little bit more, tell me more about so right now, like what's the main thing that you're interested in when it comes to coaching? Like what's really like, you know,
I still like coaching classes. I'm and this is where the procrastination comes in. I would like to get more involved in personal training. I've had a few clients over the last few years. And just to kind of take a step back, like when I first got my certification, I took a bunch of classes. Like I took mobility, I took weightlifting.
These are all the seminars you mean? Like different seminars?
Yeah, through CrossFit. I was just like class and not really just like, it felt like, okay, all the knowledge, I need all the knowledge. But I didn't really have any focus, right? So about 2 years ago, I went for my weightlifting 2 certification and there was 5 of us. So there was no hiding in this class. And I realized that Olympic weightlifting wasn't my passion, right? I like it. I love doing it.
You like to do it, but it's not something you necessarily want to
coach, right? And I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that I was an Olympic lifting coach. So it told me that I need to figure out what aspect of CrossFit I liked, where I wanted to go and what kind of coach did I want to be. And so I realized that I like working with people like who are older, right? So I've worked with a lot of plus 60 women, especially. And that's kind of where I want my focus to go next, is to just kind of get people in their golden years to be as healthy as possible, to enjoy their golden years as much as possible.
Yeah. And you've been dealing with aging parents and just people and you're starting to see the decline of them physically. And it's something that really motivates you to say, like, I really want to help these people have a better life those last 10, 20, 30 years of their life, instead of the slow march to decrepitude, right?
Well, like one of my clients now, a month in, I'm sure she just was not sure this was the thing, right? But she had been told she should do some strength training. So she came to me. And a month in, I have her do a lot of core work and a lot of single leg, single arm work. And she said to me a month in, I can put my pants on without holding on to something now. And that was like a big accomplishment for her, right? Like she didn't know that she was missing out on certain.
Yeah. The average person doesn't think like that, right? They don't realize that, like, whoa, I can't even balance on one foot. What does that mean? Am I never going to be able to do that ever again? Is that just the way life works?
Right. You just feel like, oh, I'm just getting old. This is part of it, right? And it doesn't have to be. So that's generally where I'm hoping to expand my knowledge and focus, is helping older people.
Yeah, and so that kind of ties into what we were doing with the Spark program. So the Spark program, for those of you guys who don't know, is it's an added program. So it's an additional programming to the main gym programming. Let me see if I can pull this up. And it's basically a barbell-less program, right? So there's no barbells, and you can see, if you're watching the video, you'll see the format here that we came up with. And really, the idea was, I understand, and all my experience and education is said that, like, if we don't have, strength training as part of our main program, it's not a good program, right? It's good to get out and move and do sort of cardio or do, metcons or whatever, but ultimately we need to have some sort of strength component to really create longevity and provide the most benefit for people's time invested. That being said, there's always going to be this group of people that are intimidated by the barbell, or you have people who are a little bit older who don't need to be doing, tons of barbell work and these crazy intense metcons. Instead, we wanted to have something that was a little bit more of an option that integrates. I think the biggest thing, this is something you'll hear me talk about quite a bit, is that having a totally separate program from your main program isn't a good scenario, because what happens is now that those people who are in that extra program, that boot camp class or whatever you want to call it, they're almost never going to graduate to the CrossFit class or your main programming. And the reason for that is they don't see the connections, and it's a really hard sell. And you create these compartmentalization problems where your regular CrossFitters won't go to that class, and then they might. They're usually a little more adventurous, and then you end up with but your other people won't ever go. By having the two integrated, where they're doing this similar workouts and usually the same types of movements each day, you can point to Susan and say, hey, look, Susan, the dumbbells you used today are actually heavier than the health option in the main program, and it's almost the same workout. That's pretty awesome. And she's like, wow, yeah. And then you say, do you think maybe, you can do Spark twice a week and then do the CrossFit once a week? And then she's like, oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, look, there's a lot more of these classes on the schedule, so it's going to be easier for you to go to, to come to the gym to your schedule. And she's like, oh, that's great. And so you can graduate people to a program that's going to create a lot more sustainability long term. And then for your main gym people, they'll be able to go to the Spark class because, the problem I see, and I've seen it many times with the gyms I help, that they'll have these two separate programs going, and the main gym programming had 100 and something wall balls in it. And then they come in the next day and they do, oh, I'm going to take it easy today. I'm going to do the Spark class. Well, there's another 100 and something wall balls in it, right? And that's just a recipe for soreness, and it's not good. It's not a program. They're not following a good program. Then it's going to help them continue to get the most results. And so by having it be the same program, they can go back and forth. So if they want to take a day off of the main program, they can. And so that's why it's so important, I believe, to have the programs integrated versus just having it be a totally separate program. So the Spark format is it can be done in 45 minutes or it can be done in an hour. And the way we do that is we have what's called a pre-charge, which is kind of like just a really basic warm up. If you're doing the 45-minute version, you would have people do that before class, so you have them show up a few minutes early and go through. It doesn't take that long, definitely not longer than 5 or 10 minutes. But it's usually just like some rowing and some basic stuff, some skipping rope or that sort of thing. And then we have the Align, which is usually like a yoga flow. So it's a little bit more, it's designed to be, we repeat them. I think we have 14 or 15 different ones that we kind of cycle through because we want people to actually learn it. Like in martial arts, it's like a kata, like it's like a little flow that they can go through. So once people get used to it, it's easier to coach and people can kind of do it on their own, so to speak. So the coach kind of leads everyone. They all go through all these different positions together. And it's a little bit of prehab. It's a little bit of yoga, but it's basically like stretching and muscle activation stuff. Not a lot of stretching, but really more muscle activation. Then we have what's called balance. And this isn't every day, but if we have a longer sort of workout plan, we may not do it. The balance is actually strength work, but we sneak it in, and it's a lot of single limb work. It's a lot of so it's a lot of single leg deadlifts and single arm pressing and basic squat stuff. But we use dumbbells and kettlebells, and so people are again not as intimidated because it's not the barbell. And we're only going to spend about 10 minutes on that, so it's not a huge part of the program. And then we have the burn, which is just a big, these circuits that are 20, sometimes 30 minutes long. Lots of cycles of rest in that though too. A lot of Fight Gone Bad style, where we're doing a 1 minute interval so people can kind of self-regulate. And everything is kind of written for the people who are just more on the beginning of their journey and less on, but we have scale ups for people who want to be more advanced. And one of the things that we do differently is we don't put weights on there, right? So we say it should be light, medium, or heavy, depending on what the stimulus we're looking for is. And that's all relative to them, right? So should it be a lightweight? Should it be a heavyweight? And then that would be the 45-minute, just going from the Align, the balance, and the burn. That's the 45-minute time. And then if you want to make it an hour, we have the bonus, which again, if you're doing the 45-minute, people would do after class. But it's basically just some core work and some glutes work and a little bit of bodybuilding, functional bodybuilding, for people who want that little bit extra. But yeah, so Anne has been helping us with this, and I think it's been a huge success. Gyms love it. Most of you guys, if you guys are at a gym that doesn't have it, and you're interested, you can mention it to them. But just be prepared that it's probably going to be a little bit of an extra charge, right? So if you have a regular membership, it might be a little bit extra to go to this if they're going to add this class. You should expect to pay a little bit more for that class. So what did you want to add about the Spark, Ian?
Mostly just that it is adaptable. So you can scale it up or scale it down as needed. Sometimes, especially if you get CrossFitters in the class, because they're trying to take it a little easier that day. But if we have box dips and that they're adept at ring dips, they can always scale up, right? And I think it also allows, we give you scale up options, but I think it allows for the coaches to be a little creative as well and say, hey, there's we have other progressions that you can use as well. So I think.
Yeah. And we also do different movements too sometimes, like sometimes you'll see things like ball slams and other movements that we don't normally do and kind of in the main programming, but there. So it's kind of a slightly different flavor too, which is kind of neat. I will say that it's if you're looking for a really brutal beat down, this isn't going to be it. That's not really what you can scale it up to that. But I do know that like we had somebody on it that it wasn't really catering to the crowd that they had, right? So what they wanted was they had this extra boot camp class, but it was really just like a 30, 40 minute Metcon class. And it was really more for the more advanced people, right? And so they were trying this and they're like, oh, it's not hard enough. And I feel like we're not, one of the things that we have to always to be careful with programming is we don't put too many different movements into a day. And if you have an advanced class, yeah, you could do 8, 10 different movements in multiple, AMRAP Metcons or whatever. But the problem is as coaches, if we have to teach that, like we're going to run out of time. And so if you have a workout with a bunch of rests and stuff that's 30, 40 minutes long, and you still got to warm people up, and then you got to teach the movements, there's just not enough to fit in the hour, right? So we do kind of limit the movements down to, 6 kind of being on the higher side. And every once in a while we'll go more than that. But and that's just because we have to fit it into the time slot. But I think that's good. I hope you guys who are doing the Spark love it. And if you guys haven't tried it yet, you should definitely think about trying it out and adding it on as a class. I think it's a great addition to the program. Let's talk about this procrastination video. I was gonna say this procrastination article. Let's stop procrastinating. Let's do it. So this is on the New York Times. I'll put a link in the description so you guys can check it out for yourselves. But again, if you guys who are regular listeners know, I like this little graphic, by the way, the airplane's flying. We like to take articles and recent research or whatever and kind of break it down and talk about, is it real? Maybe give you guys some more action item things you can do to help create change in your lives and in the world around you. And so what was your first thoughts about this program or this?
For me, I am the ultimate procrastinator for sure. What I really liked was how it talked about it being more of an emotional response. So feelings of self-doubt and insecurity about the task at hand. So you go off and you do something that you're comfortable with.
So that's the big paradigm shift, right? Yeah. Like, and this kind of blew my mind was because I'm pretty good at procrastinating too, and it's that people. What you have to realize is that you're procrastinating because it's emotional, right? It's actually you're avoiding uncomfortable feelings, like you're not good enough, or like this is going to suck when I'm doing it, or things like that, where you're basically putting it off. And so what you do is you then shovel it off to somebody else, right? And what the article talks about, and this is true in the research, is that we as humans have trouble feeling familiar with our future selves. Like we feel like it's a stranger. And that's why we have a hard time implementing new habits and changing our behaviors that are going to help our future selves. And so we just shovel off, oh, well, I'll just do it later. It's like handing it off to a stranger, right? And so then we go on procrastinating and doing these other things, right?
And it just adds to the stress, right? So there's a stress of doing the task. Now you've put it off. And so you're still dealing with that stress. I like how they talk about the instant gratification part of it. So what they're saying is like, you're not being lazy because you're replacing the task with another task. And by doing that other task, you get a little satisfaction out of it. So it definitely, increases your endorphins about that moment. But then later on, you still have to deal with the stress and all the negative feelings associated with the task.
What did you say about college?
Oh, yeah, I had the cleanest apartment in college. Whenever I had to write a paper, because that was the thing that was always the most stressful for me, I had the cleanest apartment.
Yeah. And so I think that's something that we all do. And that's where procrastination can sometimes, you can use it to your advantage, right? There's two ways that I know of to use procrastination to your advantage. If it's putting off, if you can put off like a major purchase or something that is going to cost you money, and instead of buying it in the moment, when you're just, surfing Amazon or whatever, procrastinate, put it off. Say like, I'm going to come back to this. I'm just going to leave this tab open and, wait a day or two. And if I still want it, then I'll get it, right? Or I'm going to do more research. And so if you can put those things off, that's actually can be a good way to use procrastination. Things that that maybe you shouldn't be impulse doing. And then the other thing is if you can switch tasks, right? This is one of the ways to be efficient is, you can be putting things off, but if you're going to procrastinate, maybe try to do something else that is also going to be productive, maybe something else you've been putting off. And sometimes by just changing tasks, you can, it feels like something different. So you can, instead of just doing something like surfing social media, you can go work on that other task. That can be another way to use procrastination. So cleaning the apartment's not the worst thing in the world, but it's definitely not a priority.
Right.
If you had procrastinated by, studying for another class or working on some other project, that might've been a little bit better. But that's kind of what we're talking about, you guys, is the procrastination happens because we're avoiding those uncomfortable feelings. And so we end up usually doing something that's not nearly as time critical. And I think what some of the advice that I really liked, what was your favorite takeaway?
So basically you have to kind of reward yourself for doing those tasks that you don't want to do, right? I've actually been listening to a podcast, audiobook about, it's called How to Stop Feeling Like Shit. And one of the things it talks about is how we negative speak to ourselves. Like we speak to ourselves in a way that we would never speak to anybody else. And so when we're procrastinating, we're just like, oh, you're gonna suck at this. It's gonna be so bad. They're gonna hate it. Kind of feelings about this task. Sometimes, like if it's schoolwork or a project for work. So we do something that we feel some sort of reward for. So this is saying just kind of like, giving yourself some more positive thoughts. Forgiving yourself for procrastinating and then moving forward and then somehow rewarding yourself for all.
Yeah, they call it the bigger, better offer, BBO.
Yeah, the bigger, better offer, yeah.
But yeah, I think the self-compassion is kind of what you're talking about. And some of the studies that they said was giving yourself remembering like, hey, I've done this before in the past, or, I remember how good it felt to get this thing done. And remembering those feelings and saying like, yeah, I know I've been procrastinating for the last, 20 minutes or whatever, but yeah, I've done this, I can do this, and giving yourself kind of the leeway, like you're parenting or like when you're coaching, giving yourself that like talking to yourself like that versus beating yourself up and trying to kick yourself in the pants and get motivated is, when you have that self-compassion, like the research that they did was, people who kind of gave themselves compassion on studying for an exam were less likely to procrastinate the next time versus, the people who beat themselves up because they procrastinated too much were more likely to procrastinate the next time because, again, it was the association with the negative feelings.
Right.
The procrastination just adds to the extra. If you already feel bad about procrastinating and then you beat yourself up, you're just stacking on more bad feelings. So you're more likely to procrastinate the next time.
Right.
And then the bigger, better offer, is really just sort of like, thinking about all the benefits of doing it and trying to get your mind wrapped around this concept of what are the actual benefits of getting this thing done versus the, thinking about the negative thoughts of how uncomfortable it's going to be or whatever. I really like the some of the other action items with the like cultivate curiosity. So it's like if you find yourself procrastinating, a lot of times you don't realize you're doing it, right? You solve something, wait, why am I procrastinating? And it's usually, if you just step back outside of yourself and remember what you were doing before this, what feelings you're having, just be curious about like, why am I procrastinating this? Why am I putting this off? Right. And thinking about it that way can sometimes help you realize, oh, those feelings are silly, like they don't really make any sense. or is it really intense? Like what's really going on here? Why is this, and how can I work on those feelings and not just the task at hand?
Right.
And then I like to consider the next action. So they mentioned that the kind of the age old advice is always just get started on the smallest piece possible, and that's obviously effective, but sometimes just thinking about, the next step. Okay, I've got to write this article, or I've got to start this report for work. And what you can do is just think about opening the document, right, or the program, and I guess they're called apps now. I don't know how that stuff works. You open the app, and then just think about opening the app and putting the date, or putting your name down, or whatever you got to do, and you just think about it, and then you're like, okay, I could do that, and then you go do it, and then you think about the next task, and and that really helps you get started in getting things done, right?
Right. I have many times just said, okay, well, just if you're doing a spreadsheet, right, just frame it out, right? Get the framework done.
Mm-hmm.
And then usually by the time you started the framework, you've gotten those juices flowing in your brain, and you just start doing on the project. And before you know it,
It's done.
It's done.
Yeah. And I also like the one which make your temptations more inconvenient, and also make your good habits better. And this is something that we talked about in one of the other podcasts, which was the push-pull technique when it comes to changing behavior. If you can work a problem from both ends, so for example, with social media, like, I do too much social media. And so it's like, okay, make it harder to sign in or log in and delete the apps or whatever. And then also figure out a way to, reward yourself for something that you did well. So you're working the problem from both ends. So you can imagine, like, you got this big heavy sled, so to speak, that you've got to move. Well, if you have one person pulling it and one person pushing it, it's going to go a lot easier than if you're just trying to pull or just trying to push. And so I think a lot of times people are struggling with procrastination now because there's just so many things. You guys, I would imagine that you guys listening to this are procrastinating on things you need to get done right now in your lives. There's something else that you need to get started. And again, using some of these, the biggest paradigm shift is that what is the feelings that are going on associated with this, and are you really just avoiding those feelings? Is that what's going on, or is it something else, right? And so. Right. Step back and then use some of these techniques, like being curious, give yourself compassion, being curious about what's really going on, considering the first steps to get started, and then also this sort of push-pull technique of blocking things. So, like, what are some of the things that you could do from making it more inconvenient or making the good habits more convenient?
I think sometimes just actually taking myself out of the space. So, for instance, if I need to do some work on the computer, actually taking the computer to like a coffee shop or something and working on it there.
Change the scenery.
Change the scenery, right? So get away from all the, oh, look at the dust on that shelf,
Yeah, and that's an important one too. Is that when we're in a specific environment, we tend to fall into the same behaviors and same habits. And this is why it's so hard to work from home, because our home is usually where we're relaxing and cooking and cleaning and watching TV and all that stuff. And so it's easy it takes a lot of practice to, like, say, this is my work zone and I'm in the moment. So when we work from home, it's important that you get dressed and you actually act like you're going to work, and that puts you in the mindset. Or, like you said, you can always leave that environment and find somewhere else to focus in and get work done. And that's why you should never, you shouldn't, I shouldn't say never, but it's really good to not watch TV in bed. Bed should be just for sleeping and for other recreational activities, and not for working and watching TV. And reading can be something you do in bed if it helps you fall asleep. But for those of you guys who struggle with sleep, like many people do, it's important that space is just for that task. And then you also reminded me of something else, and I've written an article about this. But there's this there's a really great technique that you can use to change your behavior, and that's it's the stop. And so basically, whenever you're changing modes, like when you're switching tabs on your browser, or you're opening up your email, or you get up and go to the restroom and you come back, that's a moment where you're kind of transitioning. And in those transitionings, if you stop and think about what you need to be doing, or what you've been putting off, or doing that thing that you're supposed to do, like that you're trying to build that new habit, if you stop and do it right then, because those transitions are kind of these magical points in time where we have options. And so if you can use those as triggers to say like, oh, okay, you know what, I'm going to do my little rehabilitation thing right now before I go back to work. Like I just got up and I got some water. You know what, I'm gonna do this little shoulder thing, and try to fix my shoulder. And so you have these moments of transition, and like, going to the coffee shop is kind of like I said, it's transition where you're focusing in on you're going there to work, and so, but we can cultivate these little moments throughout the day like that.
I like to break stuff up in little time increments and just kind of give myself a little break. So if I do a half an hour of work, then I will, get up, walk around, get a snack or something, and then go back to it, and then work for another half an hour or hour, which usually winds up being more. Like you sit there and say, okay, I'm going to break it up in these time increments. But the reality is once you get started, a lot of times you just kind of follow through. But the idea of looking forward to, oh, well, I'm going to go get that snack in about half an hour.
Yeah, that's the reward, the bigger, better offer.
The bigger, better offer.
I get to have that because I was productive or whatever. I have the iWatch, and I have most of the alerts turned off. I hate being interrupted, especially when I'm really focused in on the programming or doing something really, really high mental requirements. But it does have the stand up. Right. So it basically, if I've been sitting for a long period of time, it buzzes my wrists and says like, time to stand up. And then if I'm in the middle of something really deep, a lot of times I'll just be like, whatever. And I'll just keep cranking. But it's a reminder, again, if I'm procrastinating or I'm doing something else, it's a reminder to get up, walk around a little bit, maybe do some mobility or whatever, go get some water. And so I can use that again as an interrupt. It interrupts me, and it's a transition moment to say, okay, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or am I just putting things off? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we'll end it here, guys. I hope you guys learned a little bit about Ann. You learned a little bit about our Spark program that she's been helping us with. So again, if you have questions or whatever, you can reach out to me, and Ann and I will take those questions. And then, so stop procrastinating, which is always, I love that phrase, because it's always like, well, that's the whole point, is procrastination is the thing, right? So stopping procrastinating is kind of like an oxymoron, but
I used to have a saying that if it wasn't for the last minute, I'd never get anything done. But
yeah. And so and start thinking about it as an emotional component, the emotional component to the procrastination, and don't try to take on too much at once. Like one of the things the article does mention is that stress, when you're stressed out or you're feeling overwhelmed, you're more likely to want to avoid those bad feelings, right? And so you're more likely to procrastinate. And so try not to like stress yourself out too much, but again, just a few times per day, when you feel like you might be procrastinating, stop and think like, why am I procrastinating this? What's the feeling driving this behavior?
Right.
And sometimes when you shine a light on it, it's not nearly as powerful or as strong as you think. And you also realize that feeling will go away as soon as you get it done. And so
be nicer to yourself.
Yeah, and try to be a little bit nicer to yourself. Treat yourself like a child, like you would be parenting a child, as long as you're a good parent. Not a mean parent. Or treat them like, for you guys who are listening that are coaches, like you would a client, right? You don't usually berate and yell at your clients because they're paying you, right? And we're here to help them improve their lives and give them mentorship and leadership. And so you want to do that to yourself. Give yourself mentorship and leadership. That's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and I will check you guys out on the next podcast. Thrive on.